But what are we looking at today? Lots. Normally I really wallow in this introduction process, but we've got heaps to cover. So I'm moving straight into business today. So if you are a Carelabs frequenter, if you've been on the Carelabs webinar route for a while, you may have come along to a webinar I held last year that looked at how to use the automation tool. So I touched on a couple of examples in that, but mostly I spent the whole time looking at a general overview of what each part of the tool means and how to use it. So in short, that webinar was how to use the automation tool. And today I'm going to be focusing on what to use the automation tool for. So we'll look at real life cases, some examples, but also I'm going to spend a bit of time teaching you how to reverse engineer your workflows. And I think that's going to be the most important takeaway because, of course, there are hundreds of examples and I got lots submitted by nonprofit experts, by folks like you, people who were signing up to this webinar. I got a fair few and I can't fit them all in. You'd be so mad at me. So what I'm going to do is make sure that you have the tools to create your own in a way that works really well, in my opinion. So let's get into it. Have you ever opened up a brand new tool, whether it's the Keeler automation tool, Keeler, any system, any software ever, and just thought, where the heck do I start? This happens to me frequently, especially because I work in tech. I get a new system weekly, and I have found that you can spend a lot of time setting it up, a lot of time kind of envisioning, but the quickest way to get updated with a tool is to think about the end product first. Analyze the end product. That is my secret. And that is fancy tech speak for what does this tool actually do? What is the actual thing this tool is going to do? All right, once we've established that, let's work backwards. And I'll show you what I mean. Let's see it in Keeler. I'll show you. Let's jump into this workflow that I've got. And I've just chosen a completely random starting point. Doesn't matter where this workflow starts. We're not starting at the start, we're starting at the end. So ignore that for the moment. These stages in automations are the things that are happening. So I want to start there. I want to start at a stage. There are 4 different types of stages. We have the if-else stage at the top. And this uses filters to put contacts down a yes or no path. Do they match these filters? Yes, they're going to go this way. No, they're going to go this way. Wait for a trigger. So wait for a specific amount of time to see if a contact is going to match those filters or perform that action. And if yes, send them down this path. If no, send them down this path. Delay next stage. This one's really simple. Just wait. Delay the next stage for 24 hours. Wait 365 days. Really, really easy one. So all of these 3 stages I just talked about, nothing's actually happening to the contact. You're telling Keeler how to sort the contact, which path to move them down. It's really fancy and you can get really creative with all the different paths and twists and turns that you create in your automation. But nothing actually has resulted yet. That, my friends, is where the actions come in. And this is what I mean by starting with the end product. These actions are the physical do's that Keeler is going to perform for you. All of your workflows should either end here or at least contain some varieties of this. You can make your workflow as fancy as you like with these first 3 stages and send everybody on different sort of journeys. But at the end of the day, we're here to perform these actions. So in any software that you have, find this moment, find these moments, and then work backwards from there. So let's look at them. What have we got? Send email, notify users, add a to-do, add or remove tags, and add fields. That's what we're working with right now. Imagine that you are kind of a fly on the wall, a bird on my shoulder, picturing me facing an automation tool like this for the first time. This is where I'm at. I'm establishing that. And here's how I suggest you approach the creation of your workflows or the creation of any process that you come across. The first action The first thing we know we can do in Keela, I jump back in here. This first action up here is send an email. Okay. Comes in the form of a one-on-one email or a marketing email. We can make it look like both. We can make it look like a newsletter, a welcome pack, whatever we want. But I know that I can send an email. Okay. So now I'm going to sit down and I'm going to examine my organization with this action in mind. I'm going to brainstorm with my team members, if I'm lucky enough to have some, and use this action and these guidelines of current process and wish list processes to lead me. So current processes, thinking about sending an email, current processes. What processes are you and your team currently following that can be replaced by an automation? Think about the things that you do every day, every week, every month that you would like to stop doing manually, or at least remove some of the manual work from. Sometimes it's not possible to replace a human entirely, as much as the robots might be trying, but you can still remove the mental weight of some tasks, of managing checklists and things like that. So back to the scenario. We're sitting in an office. I'm up in front of a whiteboard and I said, send an email. I wrote it up. And then on the left, I put current processes, and on the right, I put wish list processes. Let's start with current processes. So I'm looking at sending an email and our current processes. What emails am I currently sending manually that I want to automate? And you see how I'm using the actual endpoint to inspire me. The fact that I'm using send an email as a foundation means that I don't get caught up in all of the possibilities, because that's the part that freaks me out the most. You're faced with an automation tool, you don't know what it is, you don't know what the possibilities are, and you start getting caught up in the dream work of it, and it can be really overwhelming. But now I'm taking it slow. I'm starting out with a clear objective. What emails am I currently sending manually that I want to automate? So I'd write this question. Maybe we'd have a brainstorm for 15 minutes and we'd list out all of the current emails that I'm sending manually in aligning current processes. And then we'd move to wish list processes. What are some systems, some initiatives that I would love to introduce to my organization, but I just do not have time? So I don't want you to start thinking about all of the possibilities. I love that energy, keep the dreams alive, but that's not what we're looking at right now. I want you to slow down, Sailor. We're just looking at sending an email. What emails do I want to send that I can automate? That's the first step. And it's fun. Brainstorming is fun, especially if you have a whiteboard. I definitely recommend that. So imagine 15 minutes later, we've got a couple of examples here. In our current processes, we know that we're sending a welcome email. Any new subscribers receive a one-on-one email from our marketing coordinator every time they fill out a Keela subscription form. So this means that every time we expand our contact database, everyone is celebrating except the marketing coordinator, who is furiously sending one-on-one emails. Terrible. We've also identified that our volunteer sign-up process, which has 6 steps, I'll show it to you as one of the examples. You'll lose your mind. It's very involved. But one of those steps is our volunteer coordinator manually sending emails. So I'm sure you could come up with 10 items right now of emails that you send at your organization manually. Pop them in a list there. On the wish list side of things, our marketing coordinator has been to a bunch of Carelabs, has all of these wonderful ideas from our director of marketing, Samantha Lego, and has decided that they want to send a welcome email to first-time donors. Our fundraising coordinator, on the other hand, says, yeah, let's do a welcome email, but I also want to do an entire nurture sequence for that first-time donor, which is very wish listy right now, considering the stages we're at. I, on the other hand, I just want to send out an annual donation summary to all of my donors at the end of the year while I'm on vacation without having to come into the office. So these are emails that we're currently sending one-on-one, we want to replace with automation, and then ideas that we've always wanted to do. But all of it is surrounded by the action, send an email. I want to look at the other 4 stages really quickly, and then we'll go into examples, because I want to make sure that you've sort of got this foundational knowledge. I think it's really useful. Okay, the next one, notify users. This action is going to send an email or an in-app notification to any team member that you choose who is listed as a user in your organization. So who needs to know about stuff? Of your current processes, think about any time you have to check a contact's profile in Keela. Have you ever had to check for a bit of information? If you are manually deciding to go and check something, you can remove that mental weight. Keela can tell you without you even needing to know that you have to check it. Think about the stuff you check on Monday, the stuff you check on Friday. What is that? Can you make Keela do that work for you? On the wish list side of things, is there something on a contact's profile that you're wanting to keep track of, but you just don't have time to at the moment? Or something you know that you should know, or something that you're checking, but you're not quite sure? Or have you heard something recently that you want to keep checking? Someone checked something and it had a really positive outcome on the organization's day. Think about that. So again, with the volunteer application, my poor volunteer coordinator is losing their minds. They have their work absolutely cut out to them. They've got 6 steps in the process, and the very first step is them checking to see if we've had any volunteer applicants. So straight away, I'm going to notify them whenever we have a new volunteer application, just so they know what's coming down the pipeline. Otherwise, they wait until every Friday and there'll be 6 applicants and they have to go through each one. This lets them kind of have an idea of what's coming. Another one we have is contact has been added with no subscription information. So I think that's a really good one to help you manage kind of your communications and how you can speak to your contacts. For example, let's say we get a notification every time a contact is added who doesn't have an email address or a phone number or an address. Basically, it's a contact who's uncontactable. Maybe we get a notification and then someone manually tries to seek out that information, maybe checks for them on social media to see if they can grab at least a social media handle, or maybe there's a team member who recently added them and forgot to put that information, so they can say, oh, that's okay, I'm going to see them tomorrow, I'll grab it then. Alternatively, it could be folks who don't have any subscription status information. So we don't know if they've opted in to receive our communications. So maybe our marketing coordinator has a phone number, gives them a call and says, hey, are you okay to receive communications? Or sends an email saying, hey, please let us know what your preferences are here. So it's a way for you to be kind of quality checking with actions tied to it. On the wish list side of things, if a contact unsubscribes from my newsletter, I want to receive a notification. I want to make sure that I'm understanding when they unsubscribed, why they unsubscribed, how they unsubscribed. Is it because I sent them too many emails? Can I go check their interactions in their interactions tab and think, oh my God, they got 20 emails within their first 2 months. That is terrible. No wonder they unsubscribed. Or perhaps I'm noticing that they were great. They were fine. They were viewing these emails and they were interacting with the emails, but then we sent them a different email type and they unsubscribed. Is there something about that email that they weren't interested in? Could we have potentially managed that by finding out their email preferences at the start, what kind of things they're interested in? So you use the notifications as like learning opportunities as well. The next one I thought of was having a contact in my Keela account that doesn't have an assignee. So an assignee, let me just quickly show you actually, just in case, because I know not lots of folks don't use it. If I go to Marilyn Monroe's profile here, the assignee is just the person, the user in your Keela account who is assigned to that contact. Now, sometimes it defaults. The person who created it can be the assignee, or maybe the person who sends an email or something like that. But quite often, if a contact is imported without an assignee, this might be blank. So what I want to do is get a notification whenever an assignee is blank so that I can check that contact and make sure that it's updated with the appropriate team member. It just helps with things like if an email gets sent to an organization email address from a contact, the assignee will get notified. So it's a really easy way of ensuring nothing gets missed and that everyone's responsibilities are really clear. So I get a notification every time a contact is added and I say, hey, you didn't add an assignee, follow up on that. Another one was Rsvp for dietary restrictions. So sometimes you have dining events where folks can eat and you have an Rsvp form and people let you know if they have any dietary requirements or sort of preferences there. And maybe you want to be notified as soon as someone has one. because you need as much time as you can to find an alternative meal, especially if you have something that's really complicated, or if you need to let a caterer know in advance. You want to make sure that you're really on top of that stuff. So that's how I would use notify users. And I've used the concept to work my way backwards. To do is the next one, quite similar to notifications. You're still letting someone know that something is happening, but an actual to do is tied to it. So as soon as I think of to-dos, I think of assigning work, communicating responsibilities, helping team members prioritize, and just taking away the burden of someone having to constantly keep on top of the stuff that they need to do. You're letting Keela do the work for you there. So checking a volunteer application. When a volunteer application is received, my volunteer coordinator needs to manually check that. And that is a human process. That's not something that we can automate. We do need a human to review it with their own intuition and think, okay, this person is a good fit, or no, this person isn't a good fit for our volunteer program. So I can't automate that. But what I can do is provide a to-do for my volunteer coordinator that takes away the burden of them following up, finding the application. It just lets them know, if you've got one, you've got to do that today. And then this way they can manage the due date themselves as well. When they get the to-do, they can change it. They can edit it or extend it if they need. The next one I had was a contact us form from our website. So lots of websites have this. I think we have one on the Keela website, but I don't think it goes through to me. But imagine in this scenario, I'm a nonprofit. Now, there's lots of people at my organization who can contribute to responding to that. And sometimes it can be a bit of a hot potato when someone submits a contact us request in this, because there's no way to predict who should do it on which day. Everyone's doing different tasks per day. So I do need a human to determine who the best person to respond to this today is. In this case, it's me. Let's say I'm managing a team of nonprofit wonderful superstars. I actually would assign the to-do for this to myself. And then on any day when I get the to-do, I would just reassign it to whomever is the best person to take care of it that day. So it's a great way of managing responsibilities in that case too. On the wish list side of things, we've got to-dos that are actual specific actions. So I want to have a phone call with every donor who moves from our silver level tier of donations. So people who've donated $10,000 to $19,000 in a lifetime. If they hit the $20,000 threshold, I want to do a phone call. So I'll add a to-do for someone to call them. Another one is major donation received. So every time someone puts a donation, gives us a gift, a financial gift, it doesn't have to be a donation, of $5,000 or more, we send them a personal thank you card. And it's the job of our volunteers just to write out those cards. Now, I find that I'm actually not in the office on a lot of the days that the volunteers are there, and there's been a problem with them coming in and not knowing what they need to do. And I don't want to have to keep track of who needs a personal thank you note, because then I may as well just do it. The burden of that becomes mine. So what I'll do is I'll automatically assign a to-do to our volunteer every time someone hits a major donation milestone, so that they have a list of to-dos to come into every Friday when they come in. Hopefully you're getting major donations every day, so that by the time they come in, they've got hundreds to send. So that's the to-dos. We've got add, remove tags, and then add fields. 2 more to go, and then I'll jump into examples. So adding, removing tags. I know that folks use tags to sort out their contacts, whether it's levels of donations, so gold donor, major donor, something like that, or statuses, volunteer. They're a really flexible tool, but I don't tend to recommend them that much because they do need to be managed manually unless you have the automation tool. So I have to manually add a tag to a contact if I don't have the automation tool. But because I have it, all of that, the adding, the removing, the sorting, I can automate that. It's brilliant. So let's look at our current tags. Which tags are we managing manually? And which ones are we adding to a contact one by one? Nightmare. Can we set those up to fire in the background? So volunteer application received. Again, with the application process, there's a theme there. Our volunteer coordinator has to manually add a tag whenever they've received an application. or if someone's been approved. And sometimes when you're manually adding stuff, things get missed, human error, you know what I mean? Another one is marketing subscription preferences. So if folks have filled in a form saying they'd like to receive newsletters and they'd like to receive event information, we track that as tags so that we can send those tags, those specific communication types. I want to be able to automatically add those tags based on what options they fill out. On the other side, major donor. Anytime someone gives a major donation, I want them to be tagged as a major donor. And vice versa. If they don't donate for a couple of years, I want that tag to be removed. To be welcomed. If a new subscriber or donor or supporter comes through our account, no matter how they're added, we manually add the tag to be welcomed on it. And until someone at my organization physically welcomes them, whether it's sending a one-on-one email, giving them a phone call, or hopefully an automated email after we've finished here, they remove the tag once it's done. So I'm going to create a welcome email nurturing that doesn't even need tags anymore because it's automated. Lastly, I thought about team members. So we send a lot of emails from this nonprofit organization, and I find that often they don't need to be sent to people who work at my organization. So what I might do is set up a workflow that examines contacts' domain on their email address. So for example, for me, it's @keela.com, and then tags them based on that. So I might have a team member tag that tags anybody with @keela.com. They're added to that tag, and then I can exclude that tag from anything in the future if I want. So it's a way to automatically identify and label, or automatically identify and remove those tags. Really handy. The next one is add fields, which includes tags, but it also includes at the same time a couple of other things. So it looks at profile notes. So you can add notes, priority, or an assignee. So I'll show you that in action just so you can see what I mean. Let's jump back to automations. Here, so we can update the priority, the assignee, the tags, and the notes all at the same time. So it's adding information. So for this, I don't have any current processes for it. I am absolutely winging all of that information, except for tags, which we already covered in the previous one. But wish list processes, I actually touched on a couple. Adding an assignee. I talked about how important an assignee can be. Well, if you never want to think about it ever again, you can set up a workflow to update every contact with a specific assignee with someone. Maybe I want everyone to be me. Elsie. Everyone gets updated to Elsie. Another one is updating the priority, which is this one here. Maybe I want to make sure that anyone who has that major donor tag added also has their priority updated to high because they're really high priority. So it's a cool way to automate that as well. I think a lot of the wish lists for this will be pretty full. I don't really use priority very much, and it's something that I can use as a quick way to filter out contacts, send out emails. Pretty handy. So that's it. That's every stage that we currently have. I hope that I've given you sort of a really clear idea of how you can work backwards, how you can build your own workflows based on those 5 things. So if your workflow that you're imagining incorporates one or more of those stages, you're good to go. You can use this and the worksheet I provide at the end to kind of envision that. How am I doing for time? Okay, half an hour for examples. That's pretty good. This is the fastest I've done this, so I'm very impressed with that standard. Let's jump in. Let's look at some examples. So when I think of automation, I think of those 5 stages. We're sending emails, we're updating contacts profiles, and Keela's automation tool is very much contact focused. So it's just things that you're doing to a contact. And basically in its most basic form, it's allowing for automated contact stewardship. So what does that mean? It's often used in the context of donor stewardship, which is just sort of nurturing the relationship between you and your donors, but it applies to all of your supporters, not just donors. It can be your members, advocates, people who are kind of shouting you out online or in public. It can be volunteers, anybody who's in your contact database who's connected to your organization. And what we want to be doing is using these automation workflows to kind of build on that relationship you have with them. And contact stewardship, it's an everyday task. You have to put in the work every day for it. And it's one of the most time-consuming components of a nonprofit's day-to-day, which I think is why automation is so important. And that's sort of what I'm going to focus on today, is all that stuff that stewards your contacts and helps you build those relationships. I talked a lot about major donors. Let's start there. I'm going to show you how to create a workflow from scratch and then take you through some pre-existing examples so you get the benefit of seeing me work in the creation process and then a bunch of follow-up examples as well. So let's create one. I want to thank my major donors. They are the biggest contributors to my organization financially. And if anyone deserves to have their relationship stewarded, it's these folks. So I'll go ahead and I'll create it. Now, this time I am choosing a starting point. I'm not jumping straight to the end. We've already done that. So let's start at the beginning this time. I'm going to choose a starting point. So for me, I'm going to choose a segment. I'm going to let Keela and the information that I have about these contacts decide who a major donor is. If you manage this with tags, you're more than welcome to sort of have whenever a contact is added to a major donor tag, but I don't want it to have any manual work. So I'm going to use a segment because this keeps itself updated automatically based on criteria. Let's look at the criteria. I have 3 kind of suggestions for you today about how you can determine major donors. Feel free to pick any that are specific to your organization. I've never met an organization or a nonprofit that measures this in the same way. And I've met over 1,000. So use some variation or no variation, but I'll give you an idea. So the first thing I would look at is the simplest way to track your major donors. And that is by using our donor score category. Now, donor score, it's a score that Keela automatically calculates in your account. It compares all of your donors together and looks at who's the top donors, who's the middle donors, and who's the bottom donors. That's all you need to know. I'll make sure I include our smart recommendations webinar that we did previously, if you want to dive into that in my follow-up email. But for today, what you need to know is that Champion is the top percentile of donors based on calculations. So for your major donors, it could be as simple as that. When someone enters the donor score category of Champion, this workflow starts. They're entered into this workflow. Really simple. Next, we're getting a little bit more complicated. Maybe you want to look at lifetime donations to establish whether someone is a major donor. So let's go total donations, which is a contact filter. And let's say between 20,000 and nothing. So when someone's total donations hits $20,000 or more, they're automatically entered into this major donor thank you workflow. I'm going to sort of meet in the middle, and I'm going to go with amounts, because $20,000 lifetime donations, I don't know if I'd be able to get that myself, let alone expect it of others. So what I might do is total amount of gift instead. So let's say that someone is considered a major donor when their total amount of gift is $5,000 or more. And we'll start with that. That's my starting point. So when a contact joins that segment, they're going to be fed through this workflow, and they're going to receive the benefits of my kind of stewardship. Now, the next thing I want to look at is who needs to know. If I jump into stages and I look at actions, I have the ability to notify users. Who needs to know that someone has become a major donor? They weren't a major donor previously, but now they've made a $5,000 donation. We have to jump on this and thank them as quickly as we can so that it's still fresh. Who needs to know? My fundraising coordinator, probably. So I can create a notification that goes to them that says, hey, someone's been added to this sequence, and my fundraising coordinator is Travis. I'll just remove myself. I don't need to know about this. Travis is the one who's going to handle this. He's wonderfully capable. So I'll go ahead and I'll save that. So think about who needs to know in any workflow and go that way. Now, When creating a workflow for the first time, I always like to put in a series of, I call them human checks. And it's sort of like a way of having a checkpoint in your workflows where a human comes in, checks to make sure everything's working, and then manually says proceed, like does something that triggers the rest of the workflow. And the reason I do this is because when you're creating an automation, you're in it, you're in the zone, you know everything about it, you've planned it out meticulously, you know all the consequences of this workflow, and you know all the starting points. At the moment, my starting point is $5,000. What happens if I tell everyone else at my organization, hey, just so you know, anyone who has a $5,000 donation is going to go through here and get this email. Someone might be away, someone might not be listening, someone might forget. So I like to put a little human check in there before I send any emails out, just to make sure that that doesn't happen, just until I'm comfortable that everyone's on the same page about how these automations work. And I remove it later. I usually let it run a couple of times and then I remove it. So this is how you can do that. This is how you can build human checks into your own workflows. So Travis has been notified. Now I know that Travis, once he's notified, he knows that he needs to check this contact, make sure it's not a test contact or someone who was put in accidentally, make sure it's not a team member, because we probably don't want to be sending them thank you, welcome emails. If I give $5,000, I don't want to receive the email I set up. So we'll go and we'll add, and I'm going to wait for a trigger. Travis knows that the way that he manually checks this is he goes on their profile and he adds a tag. So I'm going to wait for a trigger. I'm going to wait for a tag to be added to this contact. We'll go, okay. And it's very inventive. Major donor workflow ready. And let's say we'll wait 7 days. So I'm going to wait 7 days for Travis to apply this tag. And already we've created a branch, our first branch. So here we've got the checkpoint, the human check, and it creates two paths. We're waiting 7 days to see if that tag is added. If it is added, if Travis adds that tag, this contact's going to move down the yes path. But if Travis sees that it's a scrappy contact, it was someone doing a test, it was me, someone who isn't eligible for this workflow, he doesn't have to put the tag on and they'll automatically be exited after 7 days. They'll go down this no path and I'm going to keep this as the exit. That's the way you can add the check. Now, for what are we going to do now that we know that they're there, now that we're ready to thank them? How are we going to thank them? There are two ways that I've been thanked in the past. Whenever I've been, it wasn't for a donation that was $5,000, but whenever I think I've had a really large impact on an organization, I've sort of seen two ways. The first is a phone call from a fundraising coordinator or something. Now, this didn't work on me. I get an inordinate amount of spam phone calls since I've moved to Canada. I've never experienced anything in my life. I probably get 6 a day, to be honest. But I can't change my phone number because it's tied to all of my stuff back home. So I don't answer phone calls. You're never going to reach me by phone. And I think that's pretty common for my fellow millennials. We're sort of not really talky phone people. It's a bit of a generalization, but so I prefer the other method. So option 1 was a phone call. Option 2 is a really personalized email from someone fancy at the organization. So maybe it's the executive director. So I think Wikipedia sends a one-on-one email from their executive director, as an example. Let's do both. I want you to see both. So the first thing that Travis might do, now that Travis has checked, he's added a tag, I think that there'll be an action here for him to do something. We'll add a to-do. And it will be phone this major donor. And in the details, my recommendation would be to think about what exact impact does $5,000 achieve at your organization. So my test account is themed Pupper Project. So I could say things like 500 puppies found their forever homes, or 250 training classes were able to be hosted, or 1 ton of puppy food was purchased. And this will be a theme that I always bring back to. If you can impart the impact that that person had, even though it's a generalization, it's going to touch their heartstrings. That has been very impactful for me as a donor. So Travis is going to phone this person. He has 7 days to do it. The clock is ticking, Travis. That's how we would manage that. And afterwards, Travis is going to add an interaction, and that's all going to be logged on the account. But maybe we also want to do an email from the director. So let's add that. Let's go actions. Oh, actually, no. I don't want to email them straight away. That would be absolute overkill. I'm going to delay. Let's delay this next stage. This is a really great way of giving breathing room to your donors or to your contacts or to your volunteers or to your team members if you just want to delay that next stage so that they have 2 weeks to catch up on something. Let's delay it for 30 days. I feel like I'm making that number up. I honestly have no idea how long you should delay an email after a phone call, but I'm going to say 30 days. Then we'll do an email. This is going to come from our executive director. So I'll click actions and I'll click send an email, but it's going to be a very special email marketing. It's going to be a mass email in the disguise of a one-on-one email. Let me show you how. Thank you for being a champion of the Puppet Project is the subject. And when I add the content, I'm not even going to choose a template. I'm going to fly wild here. I'm going to choose a blank template and have the absolute bare minimum in it, which goes against everything I think I know about email marketing. But I promise it's so effective. So it's completely blank. I'm going to ignore the header. I'm going to ignore the footer. And I'm just going to drop a text box right in the middle. And I had my marketing director give me a little bit of copy. The most important thing here is to make sure that you have a smart code for first name so that it feels really personal. And that could be one of the checks that Travis did when I notified him to go and manually check. Maybe manually check that there's a first name. Or maybe in the segment, when we were adding folks to it, we excluded anyone who didn't have a first name, because we can do that to make sure that that smart code's always going to pull something beautiful. So I wrote a very dramatic email where I thanked them, made them feel very, very valued. If I was very cheeky, what I could do is I could add a row down here. I could add a button. Maybe I could ask them if they want to be a volunteer. They've been so great financially. Maybe they want to volunteer some time. That might be overkill though. But I just wanted to show examples of how you can also add other action items. If we added this form here, maybe it's a form that says, can you tell us why you, what was the impact that we had on you that resulted in this gift? Talk to us more about how you got here, how you heard about us, what your journey has been like. We want to understand that so that we can replicate it. Maybe you want to do that and you want to collect information. The point is you can put a form here and then you know what happens next. You wait for that form to be filled in. And if it's not filled in, you can do an action. And if it is filled in, you can do another. So let me show you what that looks like. So I included a form on that. I'm going to wait for a trigger. Contact completes a form. So now we're waiting. And I don't want it to be all my donation forms, any revenue form, none of that. It's a very specific form. And it is, didn't think this through, did I? How can we help? And I'm going to wait 1 week for them to fill that in. If they do fill it in, I'm going to add a to-do. Someone needs to read their response and understand it. So again, I'm probably going to give that to Travis. He has 7 days. And Travis can review that information and start building kind of a donor journey, a major donor journey. And that can be what you're aiming for next time. It's a way to learn and iterate. So that's my major donor journey. That's for the folks who are wonderful. What about folks who are lapsed? Maybe you have a contact who used to donate but doesn't donate anymore. What do we do then? I just want to see if I've got one here. Yes, I do. Okay, so I jump into here and I look at the starting workflow. So I'm going to remove this. I'm going to start from scratch for this one too. And again, we're looking at contact entering a segment. So this is the most flexible way of starting your workflow. And for this, I'm just going to look at something really simple. Last year, but not this year. We have a filter, a Libun filter, that looks at contacts who donated last year, but not this year. And every time that ticks over, every time the year ticks, a contact's going to get added. And when they're added, they're going to receive this email. I want it to be just donations, and I want the minimum amount to be $50. Maybe I won't follow up. If someone donated $5 last year, I'm probably not going to send them an email. Let's say $50 amount was the last donation. We'll go ahead and we'll save that. The next step is maybe I send them an email. Maybe you have it so that if it was, you have multiple workflows. Maybe if it was $500 or more, you wouldn't send them an email. You'd create a to-do for a phone call. So that's a way that you can twist it all around, kind of use your exact major donor template that we just created, but transfer it into the lapsed donor sort of format. Another one I've touched on today is volunteer application forms. And I want to show you how I would handle this with a recreated form. But I want you to remember, this isn't just about volunteer application forms. This is a template for any form application process. Maybe you want to have a really involved membership form process. Maybe you have really intense RSVPs or signing up for classes and things like that. Think of those when you're looking at this form. How are we doing for time? Oh, beautiful. Okay, so this workflow, it begins when a contact fills in the form. And that form is our volunteer interest form. We have it on our website. It's only a couple of fields. It's your full name, your email address, and your date of birth, because we wanted to make that process as easy as possible. Of course, we want to make sure that their date of birth doesn't discount them. They do need to be over 18, but everything else, it's just very simple. They fill it in and they get a tag added to them. So this is what I mean by using automation to automate your tags and the removal and adding of tags and labels, because that can feed people through as well through the workflow. So they have a potential volunteers tag added to them automatically. Beautiful. They filled in the form, they're now a potential volunteer. They filled in the form, they're now a potential member or a potential class attendee, or they're interested in this event, but they haven't committed to it yet. That's what this tag can tell us. We wait 15 minutes. We don't want to seem too keen. We wait 15 minutes and then we send them the actual volunteer application form. So the form they filled out to express their interest is 1/10 of the volunteer application form that we're sending via email here. I'll jump in, I'll show you the email. So it's really, really simple. Just a big email with a big header saying, hey, thanks for expressing your interest. Fill out this application form. And the application form, I'm not sure if I can go straight from there, but I can, is this one here. There you go. That's a real life photo of Keela volunteering for Backpack Buddies, one of the best days ever. But this is sort of how the form appears now. So someone will come in and this is where they give them more detailed application information. If we go back to the workflow, we're now waiting to see if the contact completes that form. Let me zoom out. Oh, that's too far. And when we wait for a trigger, we're creating a branch. So if they're yes, then they go through the entire volunteer application process. If it's a no, if they don't complete the form, then maybe we send them an email saying, hey, do you want to follow up? This is a great best practice. If you have a fundraising campaign that you're running and you send out a donation form, then I would always accompany that with a follow-up email on the no path. If they do not complete your form, if they do not complete your call to action, you've got an automatic follow-up ready to go. That applies to all workflows. So we send them that follow-up and then we wait to see if they complete the form again. If they do complete the form, then they go down the regular application path, which is the same on this side. So they just get put into the yes flow, except it's down here. If they do not complete the form for the second time, then we remove that potential volunteers tag. They are no longer a potential volunteer. They couldn't fill in the application form twice. Get out of here. On the yes path, whether it's via here or up here, what we're looking at is we're removing that potential volunteers tag because they filled in the application. The answer was yes, they're going down this yes path. So we remove that tag. We don't need it anymore because now they're getting the tag volunteer applicants added. So we've automated that switch. My volunteer coordinator has at this moment not done a thing, and we've already received a volunteer application and sorted out our non-volunteer applicants. Once we receive that, we send them an email saying, we've received your application. We're going to be processing it. You'll hear back from us. And then a to-do is added. And this to-do is just review the application. So this is when finally, this is the stage where my volunteer coordinator enters. It's so much has happened since then. And Maggie has 14 days to review that application. Now at this stage, after the 14, there's another 14 days to give Maggie a little bit of breathing room where she can exit them from this flow if the application wasn't too crash hot, or send an email. Depends on what you want to do here. You could even have another branch here and Maggie could add a tag saying, yes, this person was successful or something along those lines. So those are kind of how I would use all the different combinations of those stages that we talked about to ensure that your workflow is always ticking forward. Okay, so that's 3 examples that encompass all of the different stages and a couple of examples along the way. I want to make sure I've still got time for Q&A. So I might just quickly check. Looks like I don't have any questions in the Q&A box. And it looks like we don't have any questions coming through. So I might keep going. I might do another couple more examples for you, but feel free to pop in a chat, a question if you need, and I'll keep an eye on things. But let's do more examples because I've got them here. Okay, so we did an application form. We have looked at major donors. We've looked at lapsed donors. Let's look at new welcome workflow, I think is a good one because this encompasses everyone, not just donors. Okay, so we have this starting flow in Keela for a new workflow, for a new contact's been added. So whenever a new contact comes into Keela, whether it's through a form, whether it's they've been imported, whether they've been manually added, that can be a starting point. And that's a really cool one because you can also add filters. So you could drill down on that and say, whenever a new contact is added because of this reason or this reason, we have a delay for 1 day. So we give them 1 day's respite and then we perform an action. So new contact is added, let's delay for 1 day. If I jump into here, I can see that we have an if-else path triggered. So if the contact matches these filters here, they're going to go down the yes path. And if they do not, they're going to go down a no path. And this looks at custom fields. This is supposed to be, but I think I actually deleted the custom field. Apologies for that. Let's look at newsletter preference. So the custom field newsletter preference contains email and the primary email is filled. So this is a way for you to use these filters, this if-else stage, to make sure that the people who are coming down your pipeline, coming down your workflow, are eligible to receive the information. So look at your contacts. Do you have a lot of contacts who don't have primary email addresses? Then they're not going to be able to receive any email sent through your automation workflow. So you might use this filter, primary email is filled, to make sure that the only people who are going down one path are the folks with the primary email is filled, just as an example. So I'll save that. And now we've got this path. So down here is where folks with a primary email address are going to go, and they're going to get that welcome to the Papa Project email. And down here is the no path. This is where the folks who don't have a primary email address are going to go. And maybe we try and contact them manually. Maybe we send them an email. I can see here we have a to-do. It's going to Nicole. And it just explains this contact was recently added. They don't have an email address. They can't receive our welcome email via email. Can you give them a big old Papa Project welcome? Maybe check for phone number or mailing address. So that's how we're narrowing down, making sure that our paths are really specific. Oh, I can see a chat. If anybody has any requests for any examples, feel free to pop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. Looks like we've got just a couple more minutes. So I might just keep going with one idea, with one more, and then everyone can feel free to send through any requests that they have for ideas to us at support@keeler.com. Let's do one more. So I think the next one I want to talk about is probably one that I think is going to be relevant towards the end of this year, and it's coming up. And I call it a recurring donor campaign. And so what you're doing here is that you're using Keeler to identify folks who are eligible to be sent, who are eligible to be transcending to be a recurring donor. So folks who have maybe submitted a couple of donations, a couple of small ones that are around the same price over a couple of months, and you think, hey, that person's really good candidate for a recurring donor campaign. That's what you're up to here. That's the scenario. So in here, my segment is when I have this contact segment already. I've got a segment for all my active recurring donors. And I want to make sure that anyone who enters this does not appear in that active recurring donors because they already have a recurring donation. No brainer. But I want folks who have had at least 10 donations, so contributing on a regular basis. That's my criteria for entering. Then what I might do is send them an email saying, hey, have you ever considered potentially giving on an ongoing basis? And in that email, I would include a Keeler donation form that only has the recurring donation option on it. So you're really driving the donor to that call to action. Then when I get to here, I'm going to wait. Did they fill in the recurring donation form? Did they not? Let's wait and see. If it's yes, they did, I'm going to send them down here to the thank you email, and I'm going to give them an email that dictates exactly how their transition to recurring is going to impact positively on my organization. I've done this in the past, and I've left thinking, wow, what a difference I've made. And it meant that I felt really valued. I felt really sticky at that organization, and I'm still with them. On the other side, if they don't fill in that recurring donation form, maybe we wait 60 days and we ask again. What's the harm? I think 60 days is long enough for you to sort of try a different one. Just make sure that that's a different email. Try something new. Okay, I've got some questions in here. That was a recurring donor campaign in its most simplistic form. You can use all the tips and tricks I've shown you to make that very, very convoluted and exciting. But I can see here I've got some questions and ideas. Let me take a look.
We have one from Doug Elsie.
Oh, yes.
They are wondering if you can set up multiple emails to be sent to a new contact.
Absolutely, 100%. So it depends what I would spend a lot of time figuring out. Like the task there is not going to be setting up the workflow. It's going to be deciding when they are going to get these touch points and not inundating them. Apologies, blank. With too many emails. So that's going to be your trickiest part, but absolutely, yes, you can. So we can use that filter, that starting point I showed, but I'll show you what it looks like from scratch. So welcome email sequence, we'll call it. We'll choose a starting point, and it's just new contact added is the simplest form. If, on the other hand, it's someone who's subscribing to your newsletter for the first time, like maybe you don't want to look at all contacts who've been added. You just want to look at folks who've subscribed to your subscription form. You can say, contact completes a form, any subscription form. Doesn't matter what it is. As long as they're signing up to your newsletter, you're good. Alternatively, it could be specific forms, anyone who signs up that way. Another way to look at it is if you're looking at donors. So new donors, we can look at transactions. A contact makes a transaction. And we can say we want it to be donations. Contact has made a donation. And the time since the last transaction, there is none. They are a first-time donor. So you can get Keeler to filter the first-time donors out for you. If you have an automation, This is the minimum. You know what I mean? Definitely set this up. And then you can have a welcome email sequence just for first-time donors. So there are a bunch of different starting points. Maybe that's another webinar where I go through all the different starting points and what they could equate to. It's a pretty good idea. But yeah, absolutely. Okay. Look, we're 1 minute away. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to give you all 1 minute back. But thanks so much to everyone who came along. And thank you to the folks who actually gave me suggestions, gave me guidance on what you needed. I really appreciate it. It was kind of it's a big concept, and it really helped me narrow things down. So I hope that you all feel very confident in not just using Keela, but in using any new system. Start at the end, work your way back. It's the easiest way, but often it's not the way that it's taught by the system creator. And if it's a CRM like Keela, it's a big beast, just little chunks. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.